Tell me to send in that message and say, we would have a place where you can serve relative. So I'm living vicariously through my grandchildren. That's a lot of it. But yeah, I know. His mother's quite sure she's got a piece of work in my head. She's oh yeah, she says seven.
Watch just a little fast, just not that fast. Hey, what? All right, we'll call this, meeting to order. My intentions are for everybody to be able to get out of here before noon. And I know we got a long list here and we won't complete through all of them. But we're gonna start with item number 1 there, Senate Bill 2879. Basically what this bill is this is gonna provide a grant program for our counties to be able to, through the Secretary of State, awarded money to be able to purchase voting equipment that has a paper ballot, and has a paper trail. This money will go to counties first that do not have this equipment, so they'll be able to purchase the equipment. This will go to relieve the debt of, it'll go to relieve the debt of counties that still have debt on purchasing this equipment. And then the end funds will go to other counties to be able to purchase whatever is needed to conduct a paper ballot election, such as paper ballots, updates, maintenance, things like that. That's an explanation of the bill. I'll be happy to take any questions. Yes, sir.
I think if we're on the committee sub, on line 34, there needs to be a verb. But apart from that, I'm in support of what I understand Bill's intent is.
On line 34, we need to do what, sir?
I think there needs to be a verb.
Okay.
Well, I don't know, because the more substantive question is what a voter verifiable paper ballot is. I know what an optical scan ballot is. And I'm guessing they're machines that print out some sort of paper ballot. I'm not familiar with those. At one point, there was a suggestion that a voter would get a copy of the marked ballot to take with him.
How about records a voter verifiable paper ballot? What would you have it said?
Well, an optical scan, surely this all can be worked out, but an optical scan system doesn't produce a ballot. An optical scan uses a ballot. So maybe it's uses or produces. What I'm hoping, and I just don't know how these machines work, but I'm hoping that there's some sort of paper trail or something that remains at the polling place. Because someone said upon hearing that the voter would get a receipt, in my county, they would refer to that as legal tender.
Right.
I think sometimes we get so excited about machines and everything that we forget about the sort of basics of how I think elections work. But I think, as I understand it, the chair's intention is to allow optical scan ballots.
That's right, yes, sir.
And the chair's intent, I guess, is to allow a ballot which produces, in addition to computer entry, some, as they say, paper trail. But really is carried away with that idea as some are, but anyway. And my concern is if what we're trying to do is reassure voters that there's no funny business in the mechanics of the ballot, which I think is unworthy of. I'm not sure that you wouldn't have the same misgivings about some sort of paper scroll that's inside this machine that you would have about the mechanical apparatus. It just seems to me that the one thing that is almost irrefutable, unless you want to say somebody's switching ballots in and out, is the actual optical scan ballot where the voter puts an X in. So I'm sure there's a question. So I guess my question is, what do you think?
Question is what?
What do you think? How do?
Well, I'll be happy to, look at it further with you, make sure we get that exact wording, on the floor, if it's okay that we can get it out. But what I want, with the intent of the bill is that I want, if you're on the ballot, that you, or you can have a representative present at a voting precinct, you can be able to look into that ballot box prior to 7 a.m. and see that it's empty. And as the votes accumulate, you or a poll watcher can be there and watch them as they put in a paper ballot that they've marked or had marked for them into the machine. And at the end of the day, if there's any questions, that a hand tally can be conducted, and that would supersede anything that any machine tells us the actual vote is.
Well, I mean, I just don't know how this works, but is what happens that the machine records the vote and also prints out a paper ballot, and then the voter takes that paper ballot over and puts it in the box?
Well, there's two different devices. One device is where you tell the machine who you want to vote for. It'll print off a ballot for you. You take that ballot, put it in the scanner. The most common is where you just get a paper ballot. You mark that paper ballot, you put it in a scanner, and you leave.
We're talking about a computer or a machine that performs just a
Tabulation.
mechanical function of putting X's where you say no.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Senator.
I have a question, Senator, Mr. Chairman. Sometimes when I've been to vote in Lamar County, they have these, what I call like computer election machines where you click on the little, face of the touch screen, and it just, at the end, you take your card out, the little computer card, and turn it back in. And one iteration of those machines had what I think Senator Bryan was referring to. It was like a little scroll of paper attached to the machine. It printed something out, like an adding machine roll of paper. I never got anything back. It just stayed there with the machine. The most recent iterations of the machines don't even have that. It just is literally the computer screen, which I'm totally in favor of changing, which I think is what your bill does. So there's some form of paper, if there's ever a recount needed, for whatever reason, it's a close call, or, a couple of votes separate the winner and loser or whatever, and you want to go back and actually count a ballot, you couldn't do that without little adding tabulations, roller scroll.
And so Eric Clark, back in around 06, came out with these new machines called the TSX machines, which you're referring to.
Yeah.
And the paper trail it was a printer housing that was on the side of it. It really was an afterthought of the machine to have a paper trail. Yeah. And so it didn't really function that well. A lot of pieces were made out of plastic, and you have one little gear that's plastic break, and before you know it, you've cast a lot of votes and there's no paper trail at all. So what the intent of this is the fact that there's a lot of counties out there that either have dead on new machines or don't have new machines, they have old machines. And so we want to be able to get the funds to them to be able to purchase new equipment. That new equipment needs to be where there is a voter marked ballot that's scanned in.
So my question is, those machines I'm referring to will not be compliant with this new
The
law.
touch ones, no, sir.
Good. And will there be anything that the voter leaves with, or all that stuff just
It'll all
stays
stay
in
at the
the
precinct.
ballot box?
Yes, sir, it'll all stay in the ballot box.
And is there a time limit? I think I read maybe in section 4, by January the 1st of 2024, all the counties will have to change. Is that
I
correct?
think it's December 31st of 2022.
Well, it's line 65 through 67 is what I'm looking at. It says that for any election.
That's when you'll have to have the machines in place. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Sorry about that.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree absolutely with the intent of this bill. And I think you described accurately what was done last time there was a big purchase of voting machines. My only interest is for my county that was proactive and replaced those touchscreen machines with optical micro scanner machines. If there is money appropriated to provide to all the counties, I want to make sure that my county gets whatever allocation that they would get, and that they're not penalized for buying optical micro scanner ballot or machines prior to the enactment of this act. So what I would ask is that we add on line 30, poll books, and on line 50, encumbered debt or cost previously incurred for machines. So that any county, and I think there are other counties across the state, I'm sure, that have been proactive. I think maybe DeSoto County and others that have been proactive in place machines. They should be eligible for either reimbursement or voting equipment that complies with this act, just like counties that have been stuck with these touchscreen machines. So that would be my amendment.
Well, you recognize, and my home county, Lauderdale, is in the same boat where they were proactively bought machines. And that is my intent to do that. I would ask, if you will, to pull back on that amendment. I will be happy to entertain it on the floor. I just want to make sure that before we just put an amendment in there that it keeps the bill solid, please.
Well, then, I agree to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Before it comes up on the floor, we'll get together and figure
Yes,
it
sir.
out. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
What sort of voting system do they have in Lauderdale County?
We have a DS200.
What is that?
That is a scanner where you have a paper ballot that you mark and then you put into a scanner for it to then tabulate your vote.
What I would call an optical scan,
Right.
like we used to have,
Yes, sir.
for all the improvements. You got all the improvements, built in the thing.
We thought to get technical was better, but technology wasn't better.
And so Senator Blunt seems to know about all these fancy machines they have in Hines County. What sort of machines do they have in Hines County?
I don't know if the model number is, but it's a cup blackened in the oval and slide piece of paper.
I hate to be an old moss bag, but it sure seems to me that optical scan ballots solve all the problems about what is that crazy machine. And as long as we're doing this, why are we trying so hard to identify some sort of machine that, what about when we have optical scan? Why don't we just require optical scan ballots?
That is what the bill will do.
Well, if we want to have optical scan ballots, I'd feel more comfortable if we just said we're having optical scan ballots or whatever the term is, rather than having someone have to interpret the term voter verifiable paper ballot.
Before we go to the floor, I would like for me, you, Senator Blunt, to sit down with Ethan and Holly, Secretary of State, to make sure to get the wording right.
I think, Mr. Chairman, all of us that are asking questions are absolutely in sympathy with what the bill does and what you're trying to do.
Yes, sir.
And all the questions are just about mechanics and making sure that whatever's written
Yes.
down on paper accomplishes what I think you're trying to do.
Yes, sir. All right, any other questions? Motion. Is there a motion?
Constitution defense. Committee sub.
The motion is title sufficient to pass committee sub. All in favor say aye. All in favor, no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. Okay, we're going to skip item number 2. We're going to go to item number 3, Senate Bill 2358. And I'm going to ask Senator Chazanal to please explain the bill.
This bill is requested by the one about things that might make this bill better. And we would like to pay is in language in it. Senator Warner talked about this and it's just to make things standardized.
Yes, sir.
Just for the benefit of the committee, this deals with fees to run. My position is that we need to have reasonable fees that are comparable to what surrounding states. It balances access to the ballot with a reasonable fee to run for office, particularly talking about president and stuff like that. So we're gonna work together and look at what our neighboring states charge and see where we fall in that. And if we're low or high, adjust accordingly. So that's what's gonna gather that information and look at it. But I do support at this point continuing the discussion and moving the bill along.
Yes, sir.
I don't know what we're doing and why, but I don't know why we would want party executive committees determining fees. Why would we not want to have a standard fee? Why would we want to have different political parties with different fees? Why would we want to have a standard fee for running for governor?
And perhaps that one would be, after saying we're trying to make these, better. I've always thought that these were just low, right? Oh, yeah, or long. You know, that some of those, that they're just get the names on the ballot, because they like seeing the names on the ballot. And they, more realistic. Well, then that would, we were just, publicity stickers from actually, where people serve. This is just the bid.
Yes, sir.
Well, two things, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'm of two minds about this proposition. Because on one hand, it does a disservice to the voters to have 7 names running for some office, and 3 of the names are just frivolous candidates. They have no real campaign at all, just play over their names.
Perpetual candidates.
And that does a disservice to the individual voters. They're trying to figure out who to vote for among the people who possibly could win the election. And so I'm in favor of, particularly for statewide offices, having fees that filter out some of those people. Not because I want to keep somebody from running for office, but because it confuses voters to see this huge list of names, and you've got to look for the real candidate among them. But I'm not interested in discouraging people from running for office. But and so I think if we were talking about a dollar amount, then I would have a better idea of what we're talking about than what's vague. But this is the second bill out of 2 where the suggestion has been made to just keep this bill alive and go through the process. I personally had very bad experiences in this committee, being told, just keep this alive, we're working on it. And at the end of the day, I didn't feel like any of the things that I had been led to believe were going to be considered were considered. And so I'm having flashbacks and post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Appreciate your comments. Yes, ma'am.
I don't object to that, but I mean, I do think it would be well if we're talking about the dollar amounts for filing fees, that the elections committee could debate the dollar amounts for filing fees.
Okay, so we have a motion to add a reverse repealer. What's the proper, just ask for ayes? All right, all in favor of this amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Okay, all right. Any other questions? You have a motion? Yes, ma'am. As amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. Okay. We're gonna go to Senate Bill 2413. Simple bill, a one-page bill, the way they all should be. Ms. Holly, do you have extra language? Talk about this. So what this bill does is basically it prohibits any private money from going to those who administer elections to be able to conduct an election. We've seen in other states where this has been used and it will harm one party or the other. And other states have done this, what this bill proposes. And basically that's explanation of the bill. What I would like to add to the tail end of this bill is to put add any aspect of conducting an election, basically where it defeats. There's no way that an administrative elected official could use the private money to conduct an election. So I'll be happy. That over there. Ms. Holly has your words.
If it's written down, Mr. Chairman, if you could have someone read it to us.
Yes. Yes. Right. All right, we have that as an amendment. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, do we have any questions? All right, do we have a motion?
I have a question.
Oh, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Reading over the list here, I know in some elections in our state, the county parties run, like the Republican Party or the Democratic Party will run a particular primary election. Maybe I overlooked it, but I don't see any reference to any of those persons that would be running an election. I know in some counties, they punt that to the election commissioners. They say, we don't want to handle this. We all do this for us. But I know in my home county, Lamar County, the parties themselves still run the Republican primary, the Democrat primary at the election time. So I don't know if the intent of the bill was to include those persons or were those specifically excluded for a reason. I just was curious.
I think it's because financially the actual money all runs through the counties or municipalities, the state. So you may have an executive committee that's running the election, but where the money comes from is from the county for that primary.
Right, but so if
I have no problem
clear
adding
that
them.
if the Democrat Party in Forest County wanted to run an ad reminding everybody, Tuesday's election day, get out and cast your ballot for your candidate of choice or whatever, they're not going to be lumped into this very broad language saying you can't spend any private money because those would not be government dollars. Those
Right.
would be privately raised
Right.
Democratic Party funds or Republican Party funds.
Yes, sir. In other words, it's just going to be the conducting of the election amongst these, and I guess that just brings a better point of why we don't need to add them to it.
Right. Okay. So I guess another question I have is when you say conduct an election, to me, conducting election, the mechanics of, getting the ballots and getting the poll workers paid and all that, I get that. If someone were to take a broader view, conduct an election, meaning publicize elections coming up, I don't know that, my question is the word conduct in this sense, are you talking about how broad of a term of conducting an election, or should there be a definition?
It would just be for those that are mentioned. So if a Republican Party wanted to send out something, that's fine. Candidate wanted to send out something, that's fine. It's just a matter of those dollars going to the administrators of the election that we're trying to prohibit.
So could you give me an example of what we're trying to prohibit? prohibit? I guess that would help me understand better. the
We're
need
trying to
for
prohibit
this.
private money from going to a certain place and perhaps buying voting equipment for a county. I think we've had some counties in the past get money. Is that right, Ms. Holly? We've experienced this in Mississippi.
So some outside entity was offering to purchase voting machines for a particular county in our state?
Yes, they do. Yes, you have. The intent of the bill is to get ahead of this. We've seen it in other states where it's a major problem, and so that we won't wind up like that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, yes, sir.
Well, for those of us who think that ballots cast on election day in polling place are much more secure than ballots cast any other manner, there is a corresponding obligation, I believe, to make voting on election day at the polling place easy and accessible. And it is the case that there are polling places where there are inadequate voting work, inadequate voting machines, inadequate staff, and they have long lines. I don't think I've ever stayed in line longer than 15 minutes to vote. And the only reason it was 15 minutes was one weird thing during this recent pandemic. But other people have not had that experience. And it's interesting to me that there never seems to be any interest in doing something to make sure that there are not long lines at polling places and there are adequate election officials and all of those things. And so we're sitting here, and I don't particularly disagree with the thrust of the bill. But I think it, based on the examples you're giving, it's yet another example as though we needed the phenomenal amounts of money that special interest groups are absolutely wasted hiring people to sit in Jackson and peck on computers and advocate to each other, which is totally wasted. If they take a fraction of this money that they're wasting and actually use it to help some people win elections, they could have some impact. That's another rant, although I'm willing to get it. But why isn't there some concern about a real world problem, which is folks in long lines, and surely nobody thinks that's a good idea. And there certainly are perceptions, whether accurate or not, and I honestly don't know that they're accurate, but there are perceptions that some of those things have racial overtones.
Thank you, Senator. Have any other questions? Okay, do we have a motion? Title sufficient to pass as amended. All right, all in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. Okay, moving along to Senate Bill 2572. What this bill does is simply take out the requirement of a test of our elected official as an election commissioner. They do have regular educational hours and training that they have had to in the past and will continue to with this bill. If it's successful, they will still have to take educational hours every year. All this is going to do is simply eliminate the test that is required. We have found, since we filed the bill, we found another statute that we're going to have to include, another code section that we're going to have to include in the bill, which is 23-15-211, subsection 4. All we'll do is remove one word, which states that they have to take a skills test that's satisfactory to the Secretary of State. We're just going to remove that word satisfactory. So they'll still have to take educational hours, do their training every year. They just will not require a test for our elected officials to be able to serve as the people voted them in. That's the explanation of the bill. You have to take any questions. All right, we have a motion. We need to have a motion to add that amendment, right? 23. Okay, so we have a motion for the amendment to add 23-15-211, subsection 4, removing the word satisfactorily. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and now a motion.
Title sufficient to pass commission.
Title sufficient to pass committee sub. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. Okay, moving right along. We're going to skip that next one. We're going to go to Senate Bill 2575. It's almost a one-page bill. What this bill does is it simply is going to prohibit a judge from being able to give time for candidates to be able to basically politic a jury. Right now, if I'm not an attorney, but if you have a trial going on right now and a candidate for one of these offices walks in, that judge must, the way the statute reads now, must allow that candidate an opportunity to be able to politic the jury. And then also at the tail end, we remove some language. Ms. Holly, can you help explain why we remove that language and what it does, please? No. Okay, that's next. Yes, sir.
Which Supreme Court?
Any other questions? Okay, do we have a motion? All right, we have a title sufficient to pass. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. Okay, we're going to jump to the tail end, Senate Bill 2610. Try to wrap up before lunch. 2610. And I'm going to call on our good friends at the Secretary of State to be recognized to help explain just what this bill does. questions? Yes, sir.
Could you describe a bit more the statistical thing that you're talking about?
Yes, this model look at the number of votes cast at the election and where votes cast, how many ballots need to be voted. We set that in our administrative rules. What we're looking at with anything with the audits is the clear list of what we have to go in and audits the government. That way the counties know, the citizens know, the candidates know what the processes are going to be. Set that after the election, let the county know how many they can look at, the county will look at their ballots, and if it falls below that threshold, we'll have to nominate.
I don't understand a word you said. I just don't understand what you're talking about with an audit of an election. There's been an election, they've counted the ballots, and the votes have been certified. What exactly is it that you're trying to find with this audit?
Let me jump in. Mr. Chairman, I can tell you that this is a bill that I've worked with the Secretary of State to try to come together. And what I've heard during our time away from the Capitol are a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls from individuals all over the state that are concerned about the results of elections. Right now, when we have an election, the county certifies the election and there's no oversight over that. And what this is going to do is it's going to let another set of eyes be able to look at the way the entire procedure of the election was conducted and how it was canvassed, how it was certified. There were a lot of states that did not have this in place. There's some that have them in place, and there were some areas where some counties were found to not do things correctly. And so the intent of the bill, what he's trying to say is that we want another set of eyes to look over the counties as they certify elections.
But Mr. Chairman, there were also states where the lunatic fringe got in and tried to challenge the results of a free and fair election based on nonsense, based on such gibberish as we're looking for pieces of bamboo in the paper ballots or the stuff that they sent in from Red China to steal the election with. We've had an organized attempt to undermine the election system in this country. And part and parcel of that are the wackos and the nutcases in Arizona that came in with these so-called audits. And that's what this looks like to me. And if I'm mistaken, someone can correct me. But I'm told we're supposed to get out of here at 12. This comes up at 11:57. And I don't understand. And if there are all these emails that are being generated, they are being generated by people who know exactly what they're doing and are trying to undermine elections in this country. They are generating all of this problem out of whole cloth. That's what's going on.
I would respectfully disagree with you and just say that, there's a lot of people that have a lot of concerns about the results of elections, and this will put to rest those concerns.
What are the concerns? Tell me the concerns. What are the legitimate concerns about what election queen?
To answer the question, there's concerns that perhaps there's a county that just decides not to open up any absentee ballots and count them. We know that we've had that in the past.
Well, if that takes place, why doesn't someone go ask for an inspection of the ballots in that county, which you can do under existing law?
Because they don't have the authority, and this gives them the authority to do it.
You have the authority, a candidate can ask for an examination of the ballot boxes. That's effectively how we have a recount. I think we probably should revise our recount stuff. But I'm just apoplectic about this because I know what it looks like to me, and I haven't heard anything that makes me feel a bit better about it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Thanks, Chairman. First off, let me say that audits, if they're done properly, either by a candidate, that's usually who we hold responsible for doing this stuff, to making sure that the numbers are right, or a political party, but are good things. The numbers need to be correct. And I know from experience that sometimes a county will certify results and y'all will call back and say, you transposed these numbers and we're just trying to get to the right number. Audits are good things, and I recognize that. I do have some questions and concerns about the bill. You do this, first of all, you've got way too much detail in here that doesn't need to be codified about more than 20, but not more than 40 and all this kind of stuff. So that, I mean, that doesn't need to be in the statute. You can do that administratively. But let's say you do an audit. Let's say you find discrepancies. You then issue a report. Is that correct? And that's it. So the certified results that a county has certified or the state certified aren't changed, you just issue a report. Do you change the results? Is there any mechanism for changing the results? What about the other audit you mentioned? The county is doing the audit. Okay. County does the hand count and the county certifies the correct results. The mechanism now in Mississippi, in any state in the country, in any jurisdiction in the country, where any candidate feels like an election was not fairly held, is to go to court and produce evidence to show that the election has not been held correctly and that the result, the certified result of the state is not correct, and they have this mechanism for any party or candidate to challenge those results and produce evidence to back up his claims that the election was not fairly held. Why is that not enough? And if candidates or people or parties allege things and have evidence to back up anything that they allege, don't we have an independent judiciary to hear that and determine what the facts are? Well, and there are two things that haven't been brought up that anybody ought to be concerned about. First is on line 33, which is in direct contradiction to the bill that we all just voted for, that the committee is going to report out, that says that you can't have private money involved in the conduct of an election. And this bill specifically would allow the Secretary of State to hire a private group to do the audit. That directly contradicts the bill we just passed. And more than that, if you go to line 108, it says that all the documents, materials, and notes used in preparation of the audit are not subject to the Public Records Act. And that's just crazy. I mean, I don't mean to be paranoid, but this is just lunatic stuff. I mean, the Secretary of State needs to work with counties to make sure the numbers are right. The Secretary of State needs to make sure, and that happens all the time. Ms. Robertson knows that. I've done that. I mean, anybody who's worked over there knows that. And what this bill would do is allow you to select a private company to audit election results and keep all of that, all the records from that audit private, secret. And how do you build confidence in the audit when you've got a private company with private records? I mean, this is nuts. The state chief elections officer needs to be involved in the audit, but to privatize it, to exempt it from any public scrutiny whatsoever, based on, again, the notion that is out there in the public that is without evidence and has not found to be true by any court anywhere in this country, and then embark on some sort of scheme like this is not what we need to be doing, Mr. Chairman. It's not a good idea. It's not a good idea, and I ask you for this.
think we have a table subject to call from Senator Parker.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, in light of all the conversation, I think it'd be appropriate to lay it on the table subject to call.
Okay, that's the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay, I would like to say, we'll have another meeting. I hear your concerns on the bill about the, public records. I agree with you. I do not believe that, this would not be conducting an actual election. So I don't think it would be in conflict with what we passed earlier. But with that being said, I want us to talk about it and revisit it. And with that, do we have a motion to rise and report? Thank you. Rise and report.
I've been there,